Welcome to you as we journey on through the Green Sundays and number 18. And I think, Gillian, we've got a little bit of something about greed. Hopefully you'll tease maybe a bit of that out. Rose, nice to have you. Jen, lovely to have you. It's a Dunedin Central kind of gathering this week. Gillian, unpack the passage.
Just for a bit of background and context, I think, to start with. So where this parable comes in, we've got Jesus talking with a huge crowd, or they're listening in perhaps as Jesus is talking to his disciples. And then someone from the crowd interrupts really with a question about inheritance, which gives Jesus a chance to share this parable as some kind of answer, I think. One of the things to be aware of also in terms of context is Luke's gospel itself. This is a unique parable to Luke. He's got 3 parables coming up, all sort of one after the other in some ways, about rich men. Luke does have a tendency to critique wealth, as you said. You know, we've got the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor, full stop, and Mary's Magnificat and things like that, which are all things unique to Luke. But then also I think for us to be aware of in the background of all of this is those crowds that are with Jesus listening in. In the subsistence kind of level of life in first century Palestine for probably 80% of the population. You know, we're talking earning money or working on a farm, but been eating and consuming what you're earning and living that subsistence lifestyle.
So close to the bone. Well, we'll see where that takes us. I'll come back to you for a challenge later on, but because this sounds challenging. Rose, let's go to you and hear something about why you find this challenging.
Okay, so for me, the challenges are looking at the times and the places where I'm so focused on my own personal or my perceived needs that I don't think of other people's needs. And I don't sort of acknowledge the ability of God to actually bless me with what I need. So I get all caught up in that. And to recognize the difference between want and need. And I think that's a thing that's really, really big in our society these days, especially with some of the families I work with.
So just to interrupt you there, you're working, just in case people don't know, you're working amongst some of the most challenged in society.
Yeah, well, social worker at Anglican Family Care. Hello, here
That's
I am.
Right.
And it's easy for me to, well, not easy, but sometimes I do remember that God can supply all my needs. I can't actually go out to my families and say, don't, just chill. All good. God's got this. So I've got to think of a way to sort of try and teach them that without looking like I'm preaching it. So that's a challenge.
Oh, yeah. Jan, for you, talk to me about where you find it a little unsettling, a little challenging.
I'm an introvert, and introverts can do perfectly well on their own. I can cope with my own company. I could be quite self-sufficient. But what strikes me in this parable is there's a couple of phrases. At one stage, the man talks to himself. He likes his own counsel and is wise enough in himself and could do it all on his own. Doesn't that sound a bit like this introvert? You know, quite often nowadays when you send an email or, the grandkids put their badges on, they do their personal pronouns. And what struck me in this story was that this was an I and my as the pronouns or the things to describe this. And the challenge for me is to get out of myself and stay in the us and ours space so that we own community and I contribute to community and therefore connect both with God, because actually there's nothing else, and therefore out of the love that I experience there, connect with others. So yeah, mine's getting out of my talking to myself and being self-sustained, which I hear in this rich man, and that moving from scarcity to living out of the richness and the abundance that God has given me to contribute something back.
Well, there you are. Yes, indeed. And Gillian, now you've given us the sort of background stuff, but what about personally? Where do you find it challenging?
Oh my gosh, can I just say that I thought Rose and Jan's ones were so good. I was just like nodding along, like those personal pronouns, the me and the my stuff all the way through this passage, but to span that out to the us and our was Really good. I really appreciated that. I guess for me, there was a challenge here. I felt that you have this rich man and his greed being the problem, but on the flip side, you've got that anxiety of the poor, the crowds that are around Jesus that would be listening to this, their concerns. And both of those things kind of come out of fear, that hoarding kind of greed of his and the anxiety of the poor, and that, as Rose said, that challenge to trust in God. And yeah, for me to be able to do that too, if it's me wanting to hoard or me feeling anxious.
So back to you, Jan. For you, the good news in here.
I'm sorry if I only have one button or one sermon or something, but it's all about love. Again, there is this whole abundance in God's love for us. It's like that perfect love casts out fear. And I hear what you're saying about that whole anxiety, fear cycle, Gillian. If we love, if we rest in love, if we know our identity in love, it changes how we live. It changes the kind of economy we contribute to. It changes the way we're trying to be involved in the transformation of the world. Oh, no, not a song. I can't sing, but, love changes everything, doesn't it? And so I just can't allow myself to rest in that sense of something that's going to control, market forces, my neighbours, anything just for me. We've got to live into love and do that so that our neighbours also flourish. But the good news for me is that God's love and God's reign empowers us so that we can trust, we can love, we can do all those things that turn us outward.
For you, Rose, where do you find good news in this very challenging scene?
Yeah, it is challenging. For me, the bit that God blesses us enough that we can be a blessing to others. It's kind of like what Jan said, that living in the love and being that conduit. And sorry, I have got a song, not going to sing it, but just the words of this: come to the water, you who are thirsty, though you have nothing, I bid you come and be filled with the goodness I have to offer. Come, listen, live. To be in relationship with God, it can fulfill all our needs. And that's how we have to be to other people, so that it channels sort of through us.
Yeah, and this rich man, both the one who's speaking to Jesus and the one in the parable have kind of cut off from anybody except themselves, haven't they?
That's right. They want what they want. There's no point in holding on to all of that stuff for one day, because you never know when your day's up. I was going to say you didn't for a rainy day, but we've got that. So,
Gillian, give me some good news. I think we're getting some, but this is a bit more.
Good news in this passage, actually, in the passages that are surrounding it, where Jesus is talking about the sparrows and then the ravens and the flowers. He's looking to see God's message in nature there, and realizing that because of all the abundance and diversity and wonder that's out there, that's the message where we can find, security and love and know how valuable we are in God's eyes, as opposed to in this story of buildings and tearing down buildings and money, and it's very kind of man-made or human-made stuff. Rather than looking at what's around me here, look out the window and look at creation and just be reminded of God's love and care for this world and all of those in it.
Let's go to the so what and just see what we can tease out. And I'll go back to you, Jan. This man is a paradigm for our world in some ways, but so what for you?
Well, Rose and I have just come from a social justice. What was the meeting we just had, Rose? Anyway, we've just come from another meeting, and we were talking about climate change and how we live in the world, how we care for others, and how we might help to share some of those ideas with others. And one of the so what's is that I'd like to get my act together a bit in doing the reduce, reuse, recycle, so that we care, every aspect. If I just pause a little bit and take account of some of the things in my life, I can make tiny little changes that make a difference to others. I can do tiny things that help that light of love show in others. And they're all about not doing the greed thing, not giving into the fear or the worry or the stuff that closes me in, but actually looking outward and realizing something of the frailty and the uncertainty and the vulnerability of life. And rather than trying to make a nice secure space for me, doing something alongside others that addresses all of those issues. So the so what is being attentive to how I live, that others also might live and thrive. You know, there is sufficient resource for us to thrive, but I've got to stop, you know, not processing the fear and the insecurity that we have with a world that's kind of gone a little bit haywire, don't you think, at the moment?
Yes. So I love that slogan of live simply so others may simply live, which I think is what you're pointing to there. And for you, Rose, again, you see the rough end of town sometimes.
Yeah, I just have to get this little bit in. Words from Hello Dolly, right? It's stuck in my mind for years and years and years. I've got to read it. Money, pardon the expression, is like manure. It's not worth a thing unless it's spread around, encouraging things to grow. And into that, I'd add encouraging people to grow. So the so what is remembering that if we give away some of what God blesses us with, He can top us up. So it's a reciprocal arrangement. And so rather than holding really tight to ourselves, we've got to keep on giving, because that's what God asks us to do. Like Jan said, give up. What did you say? Say it again. Living more simply so people can simply live. Got it.
Yeah.
I really like that. And that's the thing that we've got to hold on to.
It's really quite contrary to our society and its values, isn't it? Totally
against everything that, even, you know, as I say, the families I work with who are living on the breadline, but they still feel like they have to provide their kids with the latest this and the latest that. And I say to them, you provide them with that now, and next week there'll be another latest one. They don't need it. They need you.
So there we are, the grasping, greedy society that we've become. I could deliver a lecture on capitalism, but I won't. I'll ask Gillian to wrap us up with so what from your perspective.
Well, I think it's been fascinating throughout this whole talk, because there's been lots of economic type words that have been coming through, needs and wants and scarcity and market forces and capitalism, because I teach economics at St Hilda's. And so we talk about these sort of things and needs and wants and all of that. And one of the things that we looked at recently was how it doesn't matter how much money you've got, you can never actually be fully satisfied. And we looked up the most expensive painting ever auctioned, which you might know is the Leonardo da Vinci Salvator Mundi one, which went for auction for $450 million in 2016. But the interesting thing with that, so someone bought it and it was a prince in Saudi Arabia, but the interesting thing was there was a 19-minute bidding war, which meant there were people in the world who had a spare $400 million odd dollars to spend on a painting, and they still didn't get it. So just because you've got a lot of money doesn't mean you're going to get everything you want, right? But at school at the moment, we're also doing the 40-hour famine, and it's about clean water in the world and providing, clean water for children. And what amazed me was that $45 can provide clean water for one child for the rest of their life, somewhere in the world. So $45 compared to $450 million for a painting. Right? So that is 100. What is that? That's a lot of children.
That's lots.
A lot of children.
100 million children.
Wow.
Yeah, 100 million children could have clean water for that one painting. So anyway, there you go. There's some food for thought.
There's no way we can add to that.
Water for thought.
We won't add to that. Thank you, the three of you, so much for this really quite daunting passage. And yet we live in a world that God can dish out grace and love and ask us to be conduits of that. Thank you very much. Rose, Jan, Gillian, see you again.
Bye.